You had Voltas like
welcome you all to this session of Rebundant Talks. Today we have with us a very eminent personality, Mr. Ishaat Hussain. Mr. Hussain is the Finance Director of Tata Sons and has been ever since 2000. He is also the Director of several Tata Groups, including Tata Industries, Tata Steel and Voltas. Mr. Hussain is a member of the Tata Group Executive Office, which formulates strategy at a group level. As Finance Director of Tata Sons, Mr. Ishaat Hussain is a mentor and guide to the Chief Finance Officers of the 93 Tata Group companies. Mr. Hussain is a member of the SEBI Committee on Insider Trading and Primary Capital Markets. He is also a member of the CII Finance Committee. Prior to joining Tata Sons, Mr. Hussain was a Senior Vice President and Executive Director of Finance at Tata Steels. Thank you, Mr. Hussain, for taking time out to visit us here at GIM.
Good afternoon. Had I known it's such a big audience, I may have even turned the invitation down. I'm quite nervous, especially to brilliant young men and women at the Management Institute. Anyway, thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you. And I have mentioned to Mr. Didima that I don't have any topic as such, but what I always find very useful is an interactive question and answer session. In fact, I pose questions back to you because I don't think it can, I'm the only one who can disseminate knowledge and wisdom to people who are imbibing it, and I'm sure you can give your own views. But to set the tone, I thought I'd make a brief presentation to you on the Tata Group, because without trying to sound pompous or anything like that, the industrial history of India, I would imagine from the turn of the 20th century to even the 21st century, our fortunes have been very intertwined with those of India and vice versa. And therefore but my presentation will be more contemporary. And a lot of what has happened to us has happened to India. A lot of the failures since 1992, because we treat that as a watershed period. And many of the successes, we have followed the curve. And more importantly, of late, the group has embarked on a fairly aggressive international strategy, a globalization strategy, about which I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. So I thought it would be useful if I just spent some time with you on the Tata Group, because it would be quite contextual with reference to all that is happening in the exciting India of today. So, before I delve into the Tata Group, there's always this debate about how sustainable is our development, is our growth. And I find this a very telling slide, because all of us who have studied economics, and I'm sure everybody in this room has, that basically economic growth has to come from a sustained level of investment. And the economics that I studied, going back to the 60s, was that economic development was purely an issue of capital formation. I think if I were to go back to university today, I would say yes, it's a shortage of everything, capital being one of them. Because as I look around today, the biggest challenge before India will not be the availability of money. In fact, there is too much money. It's the challenges of people and skills. It's the social infrastructure. A healthy, intelligent workforce is as important as the availability of capital. But the starting point clearly is capital and investment. And if you look at this table, it clearly shows us that India has now crossed that threshold point where you can say we have economic takeoff. The savings rate in India was stuck, in my living memory, and I've imagined that I've been involved in this world from the mid-60s, stuck in a trough between 20 to 25%. It used to go up, and it should come down, but it was stuck there. But now we have clearly passed the threshold of over 30%. The current year we are running at 33%. And it's a truism, so if savings is equal to investment, our investment rate is at 33%. So clearly, the India story is underpinned on this very basic fundamental fact, that it is led by investment. And Mr. Chidambaram was in Bombay. It was a very interesting meeting. It was, I don't know what, it was an anniversary event of something to do with the whole liberalization process. So on the podium we had the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, Mr. Rangarajan, who was then the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who was Commerce Secretary. So all the people who really set the ball rolling. And the Finance Minister made this telling point. He said, my coffers are overflowing. When I go to the malls of Delhi, I find they are overflowing. And he said, I keep asking myself, what is it? And he also touched on this point of investment. So, as students here, I would urge that you look at this ratio very closely. The interesting thing here is that at 33% investment rate, we are growing at about 8 to 9%. China, with a 45% savings investment rate, is growing at 11%. So you can imagine that if we were to take up our savings rate, I don't recommend that. I think China is making a big mistake by not increasing domestic demand and being over-reliant on the American market to export its goods. But clearly, one point which comes out is that we have a much better capital output ratio than the Chinese. And I would even go so far as to suggest that the Indians are extremely good in using capital. From my experience, the post-1992 experience has brought one point home to me, that over a period of time, Indian companies have become extremely efficient in the use of capital. And I would recommend that if any of you want to do a research paper, it would be an interesting topic to follow. So with that introduction, I'll also take you into some of the thought processes which are driving us. We have a strategic planning group. In fact, it's Mr. Tata's think tank, who do a lot of research work for him. And, internally, we have certain principles. One is that the addressable market in India at the bottom of the pyramid is growing dramatically. And you can see here what is happening. If you look at the curves, the 132 has shrunk to 140, which is expected to shrink to 78. And then in the middle, you get that 53, which is going to 75, which is going to go to 103 million households. And if you say about 4 to 5 in a household, we are talking about over 500 million people. And though I know Mr. Prahlad has written this seminal book on the bottom of the pyramid, we have embraced it. And the 1 lakh car, for example, the idea comes from this slide. That, this is the market which is really going to grow. Titan, the Sonata product, price point of about 250 to 300 rupees. That's for this market. Ginger Hotel of the Taj Group, which was able to be in the range of about 1,000 rupees. It's in that group. So, in our thinking, we are building this in. That listen, you just don't have to be at the high end. The challenge, however, is, and for you as management students, the challenge here is how to make money at those price points. I can share with you that the jury is still not out on the 1 lakh car. That's still to be launched, but something like the Sonata, very difficult to make money on it. Apart from the fact that price point is so low, so you do some backward engineering on it. But the other great difficulty is that at all these price points, you find the grey market is very large. The Chinese are just flooding that market, for example. It comes in, I don't know how it comes in, but the numbers run into millions. So it's a tough market to serve, but those who can get it right will make a lot of money. And we in Tata believe that going forward, you cannot ignore this 500 million market, which is waiting to happen in 2 or 3 years' time. So all our processes, all our product development, etc., is getting focused on this market. Coming to the group, I suppose maybe some old hat, all this may sound old hat to you, but what we have done is that we have organized ourselves into 7 broad business heads. And there's a lot of cheating in all this. You've got to squeeze, say, about 93 companies into 7 sectors. So You may argue that what comes under what, and there's something like consumer products which can take everything into it. But broadly, this is how we look at ourselves. IT systems and communications. The best one here is TCS. The best one, of course, is TCS, but we have put in here also Tata Teleservices and BSNL. I know Tata Tele is never mentioned in the same breath as Airtel or perhaps even Reliance, and we are concerned about it, but nevertheless, we have 20 million customers. It's not a small number. So Tata Teleservices, BSNL are there in industrial automation. We've got Tata Advanced Materials and people like that. In the engineering sector, the big one is Tata Motors. And we've got in engineering projects and services, I would say Voltas would be the biggest one over there. While we are on automotive, while Tata Motors is a very well-known company, we have in the group a company called TACO, Tata Auto Components. And I would imagine that Tata Auto Components is probably the largest auto component manufacturer in India. And it's a holding company which has a core business, but then under it, there are a whole series of joint ventures, including with Johnson Controls and people like that. And that's, I think, now got a turnover of 2,000 crores as a group. In materials, our flagship company is Tata Steel. I personally have great regrets that we gave up cement. We'll talk about that later as to why we gave it up. But ACC, which we believed was a part of the Tata Group, the regulator thought otherwise. But cement and Tata Steel had a 1.7 million ton steel plant, cement plant, which we sold in 1997, 98. So we exited cement, and today look at cement. Cement is as good as steel. In composites, we've got Tata Advanced Materials, which is in an incipient stage just now. And but there are some interesting products which it is developing, and my colleague who is in charge of it is always very proudly announces that his latest rocket, which ISRO launched, had some component, now don't ask me what component, some component which is made by Tata Advanced Materials. Services, hotels is well known, particularly in Goa. Financial services is something where we made a abortive start in Tata Finance, which people perhaps are too young to remember, that it went under and it stayed embarrassment to the group. And I suppose one of my better tasks performed by me was that I was made the chairman when it went under, and then I pulled it up and dumped it on Tata Motors' lap. But we have re-entered the financial services in a big way. We have got our two insurance companies, AIG Life and AIG General. We have got a very successful asset management company, Tata Asset Management Company, Tata Mutual Fund, which is getting very active. As we speak, we now have about 30,000 crores under management. We've grown very well in the last 2 years. Then we relaunched a company called Tata Capital Limited. Mr. Praveen Kande, who used to be my colleague in Tata Motors, has been made in charge of Tata Capital. And Tata Capital already has an asset base approaching about 8,000 crores. And if certain things happen, it will soon get to about 15,000 crores asset base. And the intention here is to be a complete, it's an NBFC. So to have a complete play in the financial services sector, including housing loans, SME lending, everything else other than retail banking. That's something which we can't do. And I think it's an open secret that the day Tata's are allowed to enter the banking sphere, we would certainly be launching our own bank, or who knows, we will buy a bank. Retailing, we don't make that much noise, but I think by any count we are the nation's largest retailer. Let me ask you here, which do you think is the largest retailing company in India? Titan watches. Titan is bigger than Tata. If you put both Tanishq and Titan together, and Titan considers itself a retailer. It gets the stock valuations of the market valuation of a retailer. And I've been on the board of Titan for many, many years. And they have outstanding capabilities in retailing and branding and retailing. That's what they consider their forte to be. Then, of course, in retailing, we've got Westside, and Noel has launched his hypermarkets. He's got two of them, one in Ahmedabad, one in Dahisar. We've got Chroma. I don't know how many of you are from Bombay. Chroma is there, and I don't know if it's a secret anymore, but let me tell you, we've even bought a stake in Vivek's in South India. I don't know how many of you know about Vivek. So but these are all different formats, and what the way retailing is evolving, it seems to me that it's going to cover all these verticals, and hopefully we'll be there. Energy, Tata Power is of course the best known one, and in renewable resources we've got a company with BP called Tata BP Solar, which is a very, very successful company based in Bangalore. Tata Power is now in a growth mode. We've got the ultra mega power project for Mundra, which is 4,000 megawatts. Work has started, and they've got various other IPPs which they are concluding. And if I were to look at it by say about 2012, 2015, they will be putting up about 8,000 megawatts of capacity. Consumer products, Tata tea, coffee, watches, jewelry. I've already covered apparel, home products, white goods. We've also launched, and I think that's one of our very successful endeavors, being Tata Sky. I say that with a bit of humility because I happen to be the chairman. But I think all surveys show that we do brand tracking. Our colleague Mr. Gopal Krishnan, who looks after the brand, tells me that Tata Sky has added quite a lot of luster to the Tata brand. And then there's of course chemicals. In chemicals we've got Tata Chemicals, which is now the world's third largest producer of soda ash, after we took over Brunamont in the UK. And as you know, Brunamont has a very large facility in Kenya called Magadi Soda, which is natural soda ash. This is our group revenues, 0506, 0607, and we always believe in transparency and fair disclosures. You can see we've jumped from 21.9 billion to 0.8 billion, but it would be cheating if I just left it at that. Chorus has added 85,000 crores to that. So that's a big number. And the profit after tax has grown from 2.1 to 3.3. You know, as I go along, I'll share with you some interesting experiences. When I joined Mr. Tata created this executive office called the Group Executive Office. He called it that because McKinsey, who were advisors to do that, they wanted to call it Chairman's Office, but he said, I don't like that word, they called it the Group Executive Office. So, 4 of us joined it initially. I was the only one from the Tata Group who was put in there. And then the Group Executive Office said that, we've got to have our own Lok Sabha. We've got to report back to the people. You know, if you just sit in a command post and keep picking holes in everybody else's work, I don't think that's the right way to run an organization. So we said we should also go back, set targets, and report back on the targets. So we have now got this concept of what's called an annual group management meeting, where Mr. Tata himself gets up and makes a presentation and he presents his report card. A lot of the data I've given you is from his report card. And one of the things that we did at our first AGM was that we said, let's set ourselves some targets. What should the group be 3 years or 4 years down the road? And we just took up a challenge that we should double our turnover and profits every 5 years. This was, I think, in 1998, 1999 or 2000, 2000. When we started down the road, we went into a deep recession. Tata Motors made a loss of 500 crores. This Tata finance fiasco. Steel was going nowhere. India was in the doldrums at that point in time. And we said, no, this looks a bit silly. So there was a bit of backtracking and caveating of how we move forward. But finally, in year 5, we did hit that target. And a colleague of mine with whom I have worked as a number 2 for a very long time, Jamshed Irani, because he was managing director of Tisco for 10 years, I was finance director of Tisco for 10 years. And he had this excellent expression that what gets counted gets done. And that's extremely true. That if you want to have goals, they shouldn't be vague. They shouldn't be vague. Goals should never be vague. I may be an accountant by training, but the fact is that what gets counted gets done. And even here, when I look at these numbers, if I take you back to, I went back to 2001, there is a slide I will not in another presentation. We have achieved those growth rates. So we hopefully will, we were a $48 billion company last year. We should easily cross 55 this year. And who knows, if Jaguar happens, Jaguar and Range Rover happens. We had at some point in time, I remember some guy got up and said, you know, we should set ourselves $100 billion turnover. The guy saw his job. But who knows, you know, dream it and you'll get it. Measure it and it will get done. Those are some very simple rules which one has learned along the line. This is just to put things in context as to where we stand vis-a-vis other groups in the company, in the country. Quite frankly, apart from Reliance, if you put the two together, they are quite formidable. The other groups are far behind us. When we started this off, it wasn't quite like that. So we really have a preeminent position. And this is the tax. You can see ONGC for all the high prices we have to pay for our petrol where they are. This is an interesting slide. You know, very often, even I don't know what's going on, and suddenly we have somebody to make an acquisition. As I joke, anybody passing Bombay House pops in and says, I've got an asset to sell, are you people wanting to buy? And we certainly give him a hearing. You know, but as you can see over here, we have been very active. And if you looked at 2006, 2007, we started in the first quarter with 8 o'clock coffee. I didn't know it, but it's a very popular brand on the coffee brand on the East Coast of the United States. And then Neotel is the second national SNO, second national operator in South Africa. I'll come back to South Africa and the globalization in a minute. If you go to South Africa, they're getting quite well known for providing telephony services, but not mobile, fixed line, or wireless in the local loop. The next one, Glacier, was a very interesting transaction. There we, I think, better than any PE in the world. We took up Tata Tea has been trying to reposition itself from purely a tea company to a beverages company. And Mr. Krishna Kumar has been working hard at it. And he met this person, getting his second name, young man, late 30s, early 40s, who has this very successful vitaminized water company. And you know, in the United States now, colas are just being phased out. You can't serve colas in schools, for example, or their vending machines in schools have been moved. So the thrust is towards vitaminized waters and health drinks. So he had this company, and a presentation was made to the board that board of Tata Sons, that we want to invest in this company. And I fell off my chair. So hardly any revenues, no talk about profits, but it was valued at 2.2 billion. And we were buying at 30% stake with an option to go up to 40%. So it was $700 million investment. And clearly Tata Tea didn't have that capability, so they asked Tata Sons if we would like to co-invest. This is where one has had to relearn everything that one has studied. The consensus was, yes, let's go ahead. We all asked our intelligent questions, but Stephanie, let's go ahead. And then, 6 months later, Coke came and made a bid for this company, and they valued it at $4.2 billion. So, and we own 20% of that. So we made a cool $1.2 billion on a $700 million investment in 6 months. So, you know, all this talk, I don't know whether it's still quite current, that sort of thinking in business schools. This thing about focus, this thing about stick to the knitting, you know, that was the mantra in the 90s. You know, one thing which I've learned about management is that there is no certainty. Nothing is certain and nothing is perfect. And if I may use a phrase which was told to me by a very distinguished colleague, he said that the absence of finality is the essence of life. Now, I don't know if that's true about life or not, but it's certainly true about business. And the important thing about business is to make money. The only thing I say is that one must make money ethically. But whether you make it by sticking to the knitting or by taking bold bets, good luck to you. And Glacier is one of those sort of transactions. So we made, and the money's come in. In October, we got $1.2 billion. I talked about Tata Sky. It's been a very successful launch. Those of you who are at the marketing side of things will probably like to comment on that, but that's been a good campaign, whether it's been a good launch, whether the product has been nicely positioned. But as we speak, we've already crossed that with 1.4 million subscribers. But difficult to make money in India. It's a long haul. Q3, inorganic, Mundra came along. Again, extremely aggressive pricing. we've now moved away from that certain return on capital. I don't know if people know how the IITT structure works, that it was a two-part tariff, which was a very inefficient way of doing things. So you had a pass-through of all the expenses within certain norms, and over and above that, you got a return on your invested capital, normally 16%, very attractive. These ultra mega power projects have moved away from that, and you are asked to bid at a price. In other words, freeze your price, and it's equated over 20 years. If I remember correctly, I think Mundra is either at 1.47 or 1.87, I'm forgetting. So we won that project, and then we launched Chroma. In Q4, there was a JV announced with Fiat Iveco. Then, of course, Great Chorus. I don't know if you people heard of PT Bumi. This is a coal mining company in Indonesia. And since we have fixed the selling price of power going forward, the challenge now is to freeze up all the expenses as close to your assumptions. So we've taken a 30% stake in PT Bumi, which is the largest coal company in Indonesia. And then Taj acquired the Taj Boston. So I don't know if any of you have been to Boston. It used to be the Ritz-Carlton, and now it's called the Taj Boston. It's a very nice feeling to go to Boston and see, in the land of the Brahmins, Taj Boston. Tata Realty is another, is a realty play. We have launched a fund. It's closed now. We launched 500 with a reissue of 250 to take us to 750. That has also happened. This divestment of Lipo, I'm not particularly well versed with. Then again came the first quarter of 2008. We took over a hotel in San Francisco, and I've talked about the Casio exit. So, when I was talking about the contextual thing and all that's happening in India, you can see the sort of dynamism which is there right across Indian industry. I don't think it's anything which is unique to the Tatas, but this is happening. There's a huge amount of activity, and lots of unheard of people. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but one didn't know of them. The other thing, I'm also on the board of Bombay Stock Exchange, and if there is an oversubscription, then the allocation has to be signed off by an independent director. So since my office is next to the Bombay Stock Exchange, very often they ask me to help out. So I said, yeah, come along. The other day, these guys from Mundra had come. Issue oversubscribed 116 times. So I asked the guy, so I said, what's your market cap now? He said 16,000 crores. And next year, as you know, when it listed, it doubled. 34,000 crores. It took Tata Steel 100 years to get to 34,000 crores. So there's a lot of, and he mentioned all sorts of things which they are planning to go into, the port, X, Y, Z. You people live in very exciting times, and I'm quite sure when the placement season comes around, you'll be inundated with the sort of talent that is required to do all this. I think this will come as a bit of a surprise to all of you. It certainly came as a surprise to me that in 0607, with Chorus, 65% of our group revenues came from overseas. It's clearly we are truly an international conglomerate now. And I shudder to think what that figure will be if Jaguar happens. But 65% of our revenues. But those of my colleagues who are very proud of it, I also say we should plot against it, that how much of the profits come from overseas. And I think that the story is slightly different. I still think that, mind you, it's very difficult to skin that cat because one of our most profitable company, actually our most profitable company is Tata Steel on a standalone basis, not TCS. TCS is number 2. Tata Steel has EBITDA margins of 45%. TCS is now down to 28 after the rupee strength. You know, this is no longer that much of a mystique as to who owns Tata Group. Because when we took TCS public, a lot of disclosures have to be made. But for those of you who are still not aware of who owns Tata Sons and therefore who controls the group, one thing is very clear: the Tata family does not control the Tata Group. I was very interested that there's a case study which has been done by one of the professors here on governance in family companies. I just saw it there, like I'm going to pinch a copy of it, if I may. And recently S&P have also done some research paper on this. And I've taken great umbrage at that because they've considered Tata as a family-owned company. And this is what the truth is, what the facts are. That Tata Sons is owned 66% by public charities. 66% of Tata Sons is owned by public charities. 13% is owned through cross holdings. So that takes care of 80%. There is an Indian, I think it's well known, Mr. Balaji Mistry owns 18%. And 3%, only 3%, is owned by the few Tata family members that there are. And it is my view, which is shared by many of my colleagues, that the fact that Tata Sons is owned 66% by charitable trusts, and it has tried to preserve the values set by the founder. It has a very major bearing on how we conduct ourselves, the values that we have, and more importantly, to the rank and file, and I include myself in it, to the rank and file of the group. It's very important to know that at the end of the day, that what I do, it has a good purpose at the end of it. You know, it's not that it is going into any individual's pockets. It's not going into my pockets. That eventually, and we all well looked after. I'm not saying that we are not well looked after. We are well looked after, and you can always debate whether it's enough or you can have more. But the rank and file in the group, I have seen it in Tata Steel, the loyalty of the people in Tata Steel. I mean, you take TCS for example. TCS has no stock options. And even today, TCS has no stock options. There is no clamor for stock options. But yet, TCS has the lowest attrition rates in the IT industry. Wipro has options, higher attrition rate, Infosys, Satya. So, this is it's something subjective and no one can go and do research on it, but it certainly impacts the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we act. Then, of course, we've got Tata Industries, which is becoming less and less relevant now. It was done at the time when we had MRTP, but now that it isn't there, and in Tata Industries, as you can notice, we've got Jardine Matheson at 20%. So, sometimes it collaborates with Tata Sons in its investments. At other times, it's totally on its own. I've talked about this, but let me spend a few minutes on it. To us in the group, it's very important, not only how much money we make, and let me tell you, we are very EVA driven. One of my first tasks when I became Group Finance Director was to get Mr. Joel Stern in and ram economic value added down the system. So all our businesses, companies as well as SPUs, they are all on EVA. So having said that, but we are very conscious of how we make our money. To us, ends and means are equally important. And this is embodied in this visual over here, that we start from the Buddhist father. There's nothing novel about it. But as you can see, we have the code of conduct there. And each and every employee of the company signs the code of conduct every year, including myself and including Mr. Tata himself. So now SEBI is going around saying directors may should sign a code of conduct. We've done it 8 years ago. And I'm not saying that there will not be aberrations. I mean, there will be aberrations. But the intent is that, listen, we have a certain heritage. And let's live by it. And again, this morning, our legal people are having a conference here. That's what brought me here. And we've got a lot of lawyers sitting there. And some person made a presentation on the subprime crisis and things like that. Inevitably, you get into this debate about the purpose of business. And this lovely book which has come out, Super Capitalism by Robert Wright. It's really a book worth reading. The Western world tends to demarcate between economic activity, which they treated as an end in itself, and then they've now started talking about corporate social responsibility. And there is a debate which is going on that whether corporates should bother about or should be encumbered with social responsibility. To my mind, there's absolutely no conflict. There's, in the long term or even the medium term, everybody's interests converge. And what is the purpose of economic activity? Economic activity is not an end in itself. It's to serve a purpose, and a rather limited purpose, if I may say so, an important, but a limited purpose. And that's why when people start talking, and I gave them an example, this person, I think it was an Englishman, he was saying there's a great debate going on in the UK whether CSR should be codified. I said, you cannot codify something. It has to be part of the DNA. Where the mistake that's being made is CSR is being looked upon as altruism. Now clearly, altruism is not a goal of business. But being socially responsible is one of the only way you can have a long-term sustainable business. And I gave the example of what has happened to our coal mines in, anyone here from Jharkhand? We operate in West Bokaro. Not Dhanbad also. But as you know, West Bokaro today is totally taken over by the Maoists. The grid of the state does not run there. But yet, we are operating 24/7. The Maoists protect us. They come and meet our GM, they have cups of tea with them, they create budgets. Because for the last so many years, we have given back to them. And it's certainly not, I think there is a lot of self-interest in that. And therefore, you have to operate not a distinct limb of society, but very much a part of society. And therefore, these models which are now being developed and talked about, I think that these are really part of the DNA of Tata Group and many other Indian companies. That sound as if we are the only guys who do this sort of stuff. I know, for example, the Honda Group, Hero Honda, Munda. Mr. Munda, in his own way, does a huge amount of good work. And, there are lots of Indian groups. I'm sure where they operate, they have different societies. Now, this is around see, at the center of it all is maximize shareholder returns. Never get away from that. But we have to earn our money the right way. So I don't have anything more to say now, and I hope I've set the tone for the next hour when we can have a good interaction with you people. Because there's nothing more ridiculous than intelligent people like that sitting quietly. So I leave the floor to you now. Would I be very rude if I asked for a cup?
Yeah.
I'm a compulsive. So are you all in the first year or second year or is it a combination? Yes.
I've seen the figure. It's close to 200,000 crore rupees revenue of Tata companies for the country. How many people, directly and indirectly, Tata Group employs in the country?
In the country, I know that number. Yeah. I have to be careful because, we are turning out to be one of the largest employers in the UK. Chorus has got about 30,000 people, not Chorus in Holland. And I think our figure is about 2 lakhs on our books. 2 lakhs on our books. Yeah. The big ones are, the biggest employer now is TCS, which is almost 50% of the workforce. Tata Steel used to be 78,000, we are down to 26,000. For 3 times the output. Tata Motors has also, we like to use the word right size. We have right size. But all the new businesses, for example, Tata Tele Services, Tata Sky, Tata AIG, Life General, there's a lot of outsourcing which is done. So your question is very valid. That, how many are indirectly impacted? I would say you can take a factor of at least 5 to 7. Yeah, I should think so. If you take into account the outsourcing and the vendors and all that, I would say. I know one thing, we pay 15% of the nation's corporation tax. We don't make 15% of the profit. We pay 15% of the direct taxes.
So about 17, 18 lakhs.
I should think so. I should think so.
Sir, there was a slide in your presentation in which profit after tax and revenues were shown.
Yeah.
So what I can make out from that is that the profit after tax to revenue ratio in 2005 it was 9.5%,
Yeah.
while in 2006 it came down to 6.9%. So is Tata sacrificing its profit for growth?
The 1 year is too low a snapshot. And if I know, let's put it this way, I think the reason for that is Chorus. Chorus has a much lower profitability. But those goals are very important. But you have to make trade-offs. You have to make trade-offs all the time. And you may well ask that There were people on our board who questioned that you look at the relative profitability of Tata Steel and Voltas. But the fact is that, let's face it, Mr. Lakshmi Mittal has completely changed the face of the steel industry. I mean, you know, when I started my career, even if you look at up to 2000, the top 10 producers in the world did not account for more than 5% of the total steel output. Highly fragmented. But Mr. Mittal has changed it all. Now, if Tata Steel were to look forward and ask itself, you know, where will I be? We had our organic growth plan, but at best we were getting to 15 million tons by 2050. And even at that, because we are banking on Chhattisgarh giving us permission to put up a plant, we are banking on Jharkhand, we are banking on Orissa. Will all that happen? We don't know. But we are certainly ramping up in Jamshedpur itself to 10 million. So we know that that 10 million will happen, and most probably Orissa will happen. So 16 million, taking a realistic 16 million tons, and Mr. Mittal is already 100 million tons in a consolidating industry, and the consolidation will continue. So the way we look at it today is that if there's one pivot, Mr. Mittal, there could be one pivot, Tata Steel Voltas. That's one side. The second side is, look what's happening with the raw materials. We joke that the biggest OPEC today is the OPEC of iron ore producers, including our friends in Goa. If the BHP Rio Tinto merger goes through, they together will, I think, command something like 42% of the iron ore market. So there is going to be a huge amount. If you look at Mr. Porter's schema, you know, that nice one, customers and raw material suppliers, you therefore have to, you too have to develop some negotiating strength. And I also believe that if you look at the steel cycle, steel prices have remained at this remunerative level. Let me make that very clear, at this remunerative level for much longer than in the last 25 years. And I reckon it's the impact of consolidation. Because the steel industry is going nowhere. I was finance director of DISCO for 10 years, and my successor, who was my executive assistant, I said, "Tumhari kitni achhi kismat hai yaar. Hum rote the for a profit of 500 crores a year. The guy makes it in a month." You know? I could never imagine this. But structural changes are taking place in the steel industry. Structural changes are taking place with the growth of China and India. And in this case, if you've got to sacrifice 1% margin, doesn't matter. You've got to take the longer term. Are you an accountant?
Sir, as you've already said that your revenues have dropped in TCS, what are the steps that you all are going to be
No, revenues have dropped. Please, revenues are growing. Margins
have dropped by 28%.
Oh, very frankly, when we were doing the TCS IPO, how long can you sustain a 45-47% margin? You know, that is a manna from heaven. And we really have to, the margins have dropped. I'll be very frank with you, and I'm very critical of my friend Mr. Ramadara and this industry generally. They are not at all cost conscious. Mr. Narayan Murthy apparently has this fantastic university in Mysore, which he's created. I understand he's got a NASA-like control center in Bangalore. Who's paying for it? I mean, you go to the Tisco coke ovens, you've got the Deja standing in front of the coke oven, in front of the heat. You know, she's, I think, adding more value than the heat guy. So who gives you the right? So they'll have to cut costs. They'll have to cut costs. the rupee will strengthen, and I think I'm sure they have done it, they should all be preparing their business plans at rupee at 35. And there's a huge amount of scope for cost reduction. And it will also temper down the salary expectations. I think you must have noted yesterday in the papers, or was it today, that all these guys are going a bit slow on recruitment. It's tending to get overheated. But 30% EBITDA margin is not bad. I mean, it's not much. Thank you.
But against the rupee appreciating, what are the steps that you are planning to take? Rather than
I'll answer that question generically. If you look at the history of industrializing countries, of developed, successfully industrializing companies, and I would imagine now India has reached that stage, you cannot rely on a weak currency to see it. In 1987, I remember very clearly, the rupee was at 11 rupees to the dollar. Then, in 1991 or 92, I remember just sitting, it went up 16 rupees one day, it went to 23 rupees another day, and so on, and went on to 47 rupees. And if weakening rupee is what requires you to remain competitive, then I can tell you it's not a sustainable business. And if you look at that, it's good to kickstart the economy. I think the rupee really being undervalued, it kickstarted the economy. But then you have to be constantly thinking that this is going to change. And the more successful you are, the greater will be the pressure on you. So right up front, you've got to start thinking of value add. And if I talk about the textile industry, for example, I just don't understand why India, which has all the advantages to be a superpower in textiles, why are we in the third-rate streets of New York selling our textiles? Japan, Germany, Korea, if you look at their economic history, they have, at every step while their currency has appreciated, they have stepped up on the value curve. Japan used to be a maker of cheap goods. Today, Japan produces the Lexus, which is as good in my opinion as the Mercedes. So I don't think we can prepare a strategy, a long-term strategy predicated on a weak rupee. You can only predicate it on a rupee strengthening, and then you have a very clear game plan to go ahead to keep value adding. I take Bharat Forge. And Bharat Forge is not crying about the rupee appreciating. The Indian pharmaceutical industry is not crying because they're cutting costs and improving processes, looking at new markets. Now let's take textile industry for example. Japan imports $29 billion worth of textiles. We don't export $1 to Japan. I'm sorry. Not $1 to export to Japan. Now, having been exporting to Japan and in large quantities to Europe, the declining rupee wouldn't have made any difference. So the point here is that I'm quite sure the IT industry is going to rise to that challenge. I'm quite sure, in fact, they are looking at various models, how to change the model, how to tweak the model, and they will rise because they're all very intelligent people, very committed. But for them to start crying and saying, no, please don't strengthen the Indian rupee, I don't think that it works. India is a net importing country, so you and I as a consumer benefit from the rupee.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, I've got one question relating to Glassio. You said Tata Tea wanted to reposition itself as a beverage company. Now, the stake was sold in Q4, so wouldn't that be more time consuming to realize your objective? And the second question is regarding Chorus. The winning bid for Tata Chorus was at 608 pence per share. So, what was the reason behind placing it at 608 and not some other number? Thank you.
Let me attempt to answer your first question first. The Tata Tea is not sat back. You know, as you know, they've taken up this company, Himalayan Water. Yeah, Dadi, they've made a pitch for that, and they are constantly scouting. They have bought a company in Poland recently, and they are going more and more for exotic teas and health beverages. So that's going on, but clearly it was a setback. But they're just stepping up the ante, and they're looking for mergers and acquisitions all the time. As far as Chorus is concerned, yeah, it's rather unfortunate that Mr. Steinbrook from Brazil, CSN, he came along. And you would imagine, my guess was that he'd outbid us at any price. Otherwise, why enter the race? He came in, I think we were at 455. He came in at 505. And then the final bidding started. The London Stock Exchange takeover panel and the particular method of conducting the auction is fight to the finish. And Mr. Steinbrook walked away at 608. Actually, he walked away at 606. We outbid him at 608. Now, someday when I write my book, I'll let you know what our final price was. We've never put it through the public domain, but Mr. Tata had been given a figure by the board. See, when you take these strategic decisions, you've got to rise above 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. That's the learning I've had at my age. And as I explained to you, the evolving structural changes taking place in the steel industry. I reckon that if we have 2 good years in the steel industry, I think that 608 would be recovered very easily. See, once you enter a takeover battle, you've got to be aggressive. Otherwise, don't enter it. And you've got to be aggressive. But nevertheless, there was a walkaway price. It isn't that the board empowered Mr. Tata to write, you do whatever you like. In fact, he said, oh, you must set a target for me in any case. He set a target. And also, you just can't go blind. Every time you've got to prove to the takeover panel that you have the funds, committed funds to back whatever you are saying. So we had put in up to a point, not quite to the whole level, because we didn't want to go ahead and get out as to what others are planning. We had committed funds up to a point in any case. But surely at 800, we wouldn't have had the funds.
Sir, my question is about the 1 lakh car that we were about to launch. It's about it was to come from the single factory. But since because of the labor problems and the climatic conditions there, as per my knowledge, the project is already 3 months delayed. So what contingency backups do we have for the launch of the car there?
I think they're also putting up something at the rancher. There are 2 units. One is I think Rancher was only the 8th. So the newspaper suggested that it may roll out in Rancher. But I thought Rancher people only using the 8th. I honestly don't know what the backup plans are. But If there's a slippage of 3 months, we can live with it. But I can assure you, knowing Mr. Tata, he must be putting all pressure on the operators to stick to the target. And if things go beyond your control, you can't help it. What's to be done?
Sir, adding to that, even after a great record of CSR for Tata in the last 50 years, still the corporate social responsibility, still in Singapore, the things have gone way out of control and the name has been mentioned. Do you think that Tata's name has come down or the reputation has come down somehow in this single overall issue? Or like
Before that question, back to you. What was your view? I mean, I will obviously say no, and I could give good reasons for it, but I would rather have the view of this audience.
But sir, no statement has come from your Tata Sons or Tata Industries side regarding that or consoling the farmers over there. That was what is like surprise for other people.
The reason for that is that we have no local standard in the matter. The land had already been bought by the state. It was not a negotiation between Tatas and the farmers. The land had already been obtained by the government of West Bengal. We were not in any negotiations with the farmers. And therefore, we had no local standing, and whatever the state government asked for, we paid the state government. I don't think there is any doubt about the amount of payment that is being paid. Even if you forget the politics of it, there's been a lot of politics in it, and there are larger issues. A lot of people rang, all of us, all my colleagues, a lot of people from Delhi, social workers, friends, saying that, Tatas must do something different. You shouldn't be painted in the same brush. And the fact of the matter is that if you look at it purely in terms of value, a very good value was paid. But then we get into broader issues that how should we treat this whole issue of land acquisition? Because you are really destroying a lifestyle. Here there are people who lived off the land for many, many centuries. They have now become landless. To which I say, my grandfather was a zamindar and my zamindari was a cottage, so I have to make a life for myself, but that's in a lighter vein. But this is a national issue. And I really believe that the progress of India is going to get slowed considerably if these issues are not addressed. There is the issue of Singur, which is a larger issue, and we can all sit around the table and debate it, and we would be in favor of any solution which really guarantees the farmer a much longer economic benefit than just paying him for his land and walking away. I think we would be very, very happy to go along with a solution like that. But then a bigger problem, which has not been publicized that much, is what Tata Steel is having in Dhamra with the turtles. We are putting up, and it's funny, the Dhamra port, which is near Puri, in Odisha, further south, the Dhamra port was cleared by the government as long ago as 1997. And L&T had got the approvals to put up the port there. But L&T was making no headway because before L&T put up the port, it wanted a commitment for cargo. So they came to Tata Steel as late as 2004 and said that listen, now you guys are putting up a steel plant in Kalinganagar, can you put up a port together? They said, fine. And I clearly remember the board was saying that do you really want to take an investment in that company? But my colleague, Mr. Muthuraman, said, we need to have some hold. So we went in for, I think, a 50-50 partnership. Suddenly, once Tata enters the fray, Greenpeace starts showing up. They showed up at our annual general meeting. They showed up in Bombay House, killing turtles. Now, the tragedy about all this is that Tata said, we will pay for a study. You guys go and decide on anybody that you want to carry out a study, because our studies have shown that there are no turtles. But good, well-meaning people like your friend Bittu Saigal, he's vehement about it. And Mr. Dilema and I were recently at a wedding and Bittu was there. And I took Bittu aside and I said, Bittu, please, be objective. He said, no, this is not the place to discuss this matter. See, it's very emotive and emotional. And we've had a huge amount of problem with Greenpeace. And so, going back to your single question, I think initially people were critical of Tata, but after we explained our case, that has now moved away, and of course Nandigram has taken over. So I'm not justifying it on that basis, but all that I'm saying is that these are very complex issues, and we are prepared to engage. We are prepared to engage, and whatever the consensus, I really believe that you should allot shares to the guys. Everyone, you give them employment, you give them shares, make it as permanent as you possibly can. And we can enter a debate, but to hold us responsible for Singur, I thought was being a bad thing. Yeah, that's it. And you see, also understand, we only hold 33% shares in Tata Motors. 33 or 35%. There's 65% other shareholders. Shareholders will get up and say, what the hell have you done? You've not, and they've got an ADR, they're quoted on the New York Stock Exchange, boards may hold you up, some shareholder class action soon may start. So, it's not just Tata's, I mean, it's Tata Motors. And it's a complex issue. So I would just urge you to think in that context also that, Tata's don't run Tata Motors. There are 65% people who also would like to say, take Singur, go for it, man, There's that other view. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. My question is, how Tata Group is preparing itself as banking and finance sector is going to be liberalized in 2009 with implementation of Basel II norms? And what implications and benefits it will have on the new entrants in finance sector? And in broad picture, how the finance sector will change in India?
The finance sector in India is, if you live in Bombay and Delhi, you would come to the opinion that it's overbanked, overserved. But if you look at the rest of India, there's a huge scope for extension of banking services. And the other thing is that when I see all the projections which are being made, if you look at what I showed you just now, is saving rates are going up from 26% about 5 years ago to 53% today. And I think personally it will stabilize around 36%. And if India grows at 8% minimum, you can imagine the amount of savings pool that is emanating. So there is a huge amount of pressure that will come from the supply side. Then there is the demand side. The housing sector, you've seen how it's grown, but still very small. Credit cards. Do you know that the total credit card book in India is 12,000 crores? For all the hype of credit cards, it's 12,000 crores. So you can imagine what the huge potential there is. So, and in the US, 40% of the economy services now. Sorry, 40% of corporate America's profits come from services. In India, the figure is 4%. So, you can therefore see the potential. Basel II, we'll all have to live with it. And you can see with the subprime crisis, Basel II is really a failure. How you manage world liquidity is something which is beyond everybody's imagination just now. Speaking for ourselves, Tata Capital has launched, as I said, the book is reasonably big. We are very large now in car finance and construction equipment finance. And Tata Motors itself has a huge book. Tata Motors Limited has a huge book itself on in car finance. We have started making loans to SMEs. We just had a board meeting 2 days ago. I think we approved. We sanctioned loans of almost 250 crores. And it is quite amazing the sort of things which are happening in the country. We made advances to companies who are going into the normal real estate and retail, small play. But we made 3 investments in 3 auto component companies. One robotics company, which is apparently a world leader in this area, somewhere on the way to Mahabaleshwar. So there'll be a lot of scope for this SME sector. And if you look at it, we have got so much vendor relationship in our group, in Tata Steel, in Tata Motors, in Tata Chemicals, in Tata Teleservices, so many vendor relations. People whom we know who are credit worthy. So we feel that because of our vast reach, we should be able to penetrate quickly and get good customers. I was quite staggered, 250 crores at one board meeting of Tata Industries, or Tata Capital. So it's a very exciting area. And when the bank comes up, I really believe that you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time, especially in something like banking. If you could buy a bank, that would really be the right move to go forward. Now, don't ask me which bank, because I don't know. But if I had a choice, I think the best bank today is Axis Bank. It's a lovely bank to buy. Very expensive now. All banks are very
Good evening, sir. I have another question regarding Tata's 1 lakh car. Is India really ready for the car right now? In terms of infrastructure, roads, parking lots? I mean, the increase that will happen when the 1 lakh car is launched. Is India really ready for it?
That question bugs my chairman very badly. He said, every mother's son is coming and putting up a car in this country. BMW is coming, Hyundai is already here, Mercedes are coming, all the truck waras are coming. Why is everyone going after my poor car? You look at the two-wheelers. Look at the two-wheelers. But having said that, I think we have to look at the problem more holistically. Tata's, by delaying the launch of the 1 lakh car or walking away because of this sort of criticism, I don't think it's going to solve the problem. Therefore, we have to tackle that problem of creating the infrastructure. And that is not happening. We should be asking that question rather than, saying that, right, Mr. Tata, he has received letters and he has responded to them. That, there was a Tom Friedman in the New York Times 2 Sundays ago. I remember I go and read the New York Times every Sunday morning, and saw Tom Friedman talking about the Tata car, which I forwarded to my boss, which he had already been told about it. And Tom again was saying that, listen, I want nothing against the 1 lakh car. And he says that, and you can turn around to the US and say that, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. But please learn from our mistakes. So he pitched it that way. But we have to address this whole issue of the infrastructure. I would come from that side. And two-wheelers coming onto the roads in Bombay. When I first landed in Bombay 40 years ago, I never saw a two-wheeler. Now you can't move in Bombay because of two-wheelers. Take the three-wheeler. Thank God I live in South Bombay, North Bombay. You can't move because of these three-wheelers.
No, I think here we have to learn from the Western world. Now, they have made a mistake in the past. Now they are moving over to public mass transportation. And I think
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yes.
Start putting mass
So it's
transportation.
not rather than widening the roads.
Yeah.
I think you should have more mass transportation.
I agree with you.
And most cities now have this underground railway system and other things, you see. So it's better to go over to the next phase.
Certainly. So are you
Happening all over the world.
you're suggesting we abandon the car and go for mass
No,
transport?
I'm not saying abandon that part. Because this is something that has to be done by the government. I don't think that others can take up this onus of
You just see what
building up
difference.
public transport.
You are absolutely right. You just see what difference this MRT has made to Delhi.
Yes, and you compare it to Bangalore, you see. The way Bangalore was earlier, what it is today, because it didn't build up public transportation.
It's a serious issue, and even Goa should start thinking something.
So when you use the term holistic solution, I think it's public transportation that will provide the answer.
So, we find that the government is approving SEZs on a very open manner, in a very free manner. But when we actually go and implement them, we have problems like Singur or Nandigram. So, how do you as a group approach these issues? I mean, from the government side, you have all the free way to get approval of an SEZ and plan out your investments accordingly. But when you actually invest that money, say 5,000, 10,000 crores, you find that there are retaliations from the same government officials, say some community or some class which is being adversely affected. So how do you plan such contingencies in your business model?
As I said earlier, there has to be a national consensus on location of industry, compensation for acquisition, and we are running short of agricultural land now, whether there should be any transfer of agricultural land for non-agricultural purposes. But you see, this has to be a national consensus. That's the first part. The second part is, the way this whole SEZ has evolved, to me it looks like a land grab. बस लेके बैठ जाओ, देखेंगे कब करेंगे. And a lot of people have conveyed the wrong impression to the general public, and you've had a lashback. Now, how do you build this into your plan? I think you have to be very sensible. You've got to look at what is doable and what is not doable. There are certain SEZs which are up and running. There are certain SEZs which are up and running. The very mega ones are running into trouble. And there the game really is, okay, I'll sit it out. Once I have grabbed the land, I'll sit it out. But we are building SEZs where we believe we have use for it. So for example, TCS. TCS is going into SEZs. And they are getting implemented because, there are not these humongous ones which occupies the whole highway from Bombay to Pune. You know, that is the way one has to approach it. But I would still say that I don't see enough consensus. The finance minister is fighting with the commerce minister. It's at that level. I'm quite sure that one is sabotaging the other. You know, finance minister sent out a paper saying that so much tax is going to be given away, which the commerce minister is disputing. So there is lack of consensus, I would imagine, in government itself. And I really don't know how Mr. Kamalnath managed to convince that would go along with the problem. So there's a lack of consensus.
So can it be due to, as we find all the successful SEZs in the world, which Shenzhen in China or outside Dubai, they all have been government promoted. But out in India, we find that there has been they assume a public-private partnership in which the private players come forward and make an approach to make an SEZ. So is it the disorganized approach towards the SEZ that is...
You know, government, I would be very wary of getting into anything. All the good intentions have never worked. MIDCs, I mean, what do you call them, industrial development centers, you know, and all the countries where you have mentioned, these are totalitarian countries. You know, they are totalitarian countries. They're not democratic countries like ours. I basically think that you have to have a debate on it. There should be consensus, and then you should make it.
We'll be taking last 3 questions.
So my question is regarding the same, the question of ethics for you as a company. You've been in the company for a long time, you've seen it grow. There were other companies who started much later, but have reached an equivalent stage vis-a-vis Tata as a company. But we've raised 2 issues here, that in the Singarore case you were pointed out, the Turtle case you were pointed out. I heard Mr. Narayan quoted at a conference, and he said that if you stick to your ethics, there are high costs that you have to pay for them. What do you think as a person should be the learning for all of us, you know, as coming into this field? Are ethics more important, or you know, being smart and getting a mix of both of the two and getting on very fast?
I think I made my case very early. For me, ends and means are equally important. And in a trade-off, I'd rather go for the means than the ends.
But is it everyone's privilege to afford the lowest costs, like Tata or Mr. Narayan, you know, companies are big. For people who want to set up their own units, you know, small entrepreneurs, I'm talking at that level. You know, as me as an individual, if I want to come into a business, should ethics be the core from day one, or do they evolve?
I still maintain what I say. But you know, a lot of people have put this question to me. I've got friends in Patna. They say, you guys are okay. You've been around. You've got influence. What do we have? I honestly, I don't know the answer. But it's left to your conscience. It's left to your conscience. Would I criticize you if you didn't have the same value system to me? I don't think I criticize you. But speaking for myself, I do. You know, there are most of life is gray areas. There's certain areas which are black and white. And the question is most to be the black and white area. But having said that, you know, I leave it to your conscience. Which way you want to go. There are many cases, people who have stuck to what they believe is right and have been very successful. But whether you look at the Morgans, you look at the Rockefellers, you know, the robber barons, they all made their first million very early. Okay. So it's a philosophical debate, and eventually it has to be left to your conscience. But I can tell you one thing. It's now obviously, so I can even talk about it. Tisco had 90% of India's chrome ore reserves. 90% of India's chrome ore reserves. and chrome today is gold. And we bought it from the Raja of Sukinda in probably 1920 or something like that. At that time, nothing happened, but come the 60s, 70s, and then 80s, chrome, which goes into making stainless steel, the prices started going up, and we said we have an asset that started developing it. Others also realized it. So then, all these mining leases have to be renewed every 30 years. So we went for renewal. Our competitors jumped into the act. They tried to get a bite of it. But we had done certain deals with the Orissa government, and the Orissa government backed our transaction. Went to center, this is the place where it's dual. So the state government recommends and the central government approves. Went to the central government. My colleague was called by the minister. They had a cup of tea. The pleasantries were exchanged. When he was leaving the room, he said, please speak to my PA. The PA then put the proposal that for a small sum of money, your transaction is through. So my colleague never been approached like this. He's taken aback. So he said, don't please consult your boss. So he said, I know what my boss is. So of course, for the sake of good order, he did consult his boss and he got the answer that he was expecting to get it. It was a very small sum of money. But actually, we lost 40% of our assets. It was small sum. Question was raised in an annual general meeting. And Mr. Tata turned around and said, these are the values on which we manage our companies. If you don't think those are the right values, you're free to sell your shares and go elsewhere. So it's very important. When he went to Sukinda, one of the employees asked him this question. And he said, then listen, it's a package deal. Values go right across. You can't pick and choose. And sooner or later, the whole edifice will crumble. Today it is this, tomorrow it will be something else, the day after it will be something else. The whole edifice will crumble. So we cannot afford to leave it on this. So it's not that but having said that, you may point out instances to me that X has happened and Y has happened. There will be aberrations. I concede that. But knowingly, none of us would ever encourage it.
Good evening, sir. Tatas have a pretty impressive portfolio of 93 companies, but absence from petrochemical space seems a bit odd. So is there some particular reason for your absence from the petrochemical space?
I think it's a huge chink in our armor. I think we just missed the boat. We have a very insignificant presence. We have a company called Tata Petrodine. It makes about 100 crore profit a year. It has a gas field in Godavari Basin. We are jointly exploiting that with some Western company. We missed the boat. We really missed the boat. One of the reasons why we missed the boat was for the long explanation that I've given it. We actually were the front runners for something which we should have been after we lost. And having lost that, then we lost heart. But again, we have now taken up a 26% stake in a company called Nitrogen Petroleum. It has been putting up a 6 million ton oil refinery at Kadalur, Tamil Nadu. The financial closure is on. But again, it's marginal, and I agree with you, it's major, what you call it, gap in our portfolio.
So, as you said that India has enough money now, So it is going to be the social infrastructure that is going to propel the future growth of our country. Sir, I want to know what is the current state of social infrastructure in our country, and I also want you to compare the same with China.
You know, I can't compare with China because, very frankly, I've never visited China. But I would say that to have a meaningful, now what are the social structure we are looking for? We are looking for education and health primarily, and sanitation. You know, with health I put sanitation. More people in India use, don't have access to toilets as something as basic as that. There are more people who don't have access to toilets than who have access to toilets. Simple things like that. So our social infrastructure is in a very bad shape. We need at least 200 GIMs in India, for it to make any impact. Primary school, primary education is pathetic. There are some states who are more advanced. I understand Tamil Nadu is quite advanced. And a person from the Tamil Nadu government was saying that, who was it who introduced the free meal in school? Was it MGR? MG Ramachandran who introduced free meals in Tamil Nadu schools? He said, all the bureaucrats thought that it was a daft idea. He said, but in retrospect, it's fantastic. Because, first of all, he says, every human being must have a full belly. So from a humanistic point of view, it makes a difference. The important point was that this attracted children to the school, and children stayed in the school till lunchtime. So if you were to ask me, Kerala is very advanced. Primary education is of a high order. And therefore, we have to, it's so layered, the whole social infrastructure is so layered, that from simple things like public latrines to, having sophisticated hospitals, I would say, on the education side, from something as simple as a primary school in a village, to having GIMs all over India, I think it's so layered that a huge amount of effort is required. But if you look at the problem and look at the scale and dimensions of the problem, you may get unnerved and not know where to start. But I think there are enough places where starts have been made and we should keep working towards it. The area which I think needs to be very galvanized, and it's very simple to do it, is ITIs, Industrial Training Institutes. Simple things. You try and get a good plumber. You try and get a good welder. You try and get a good electrician. You can't get them. There's no rocket science in it. So I think we also need to do a lot of these simple things. You need a lot of simple things. And but industry, the public-private partnership, I think in the area of industrial training is required, can be done, and the results will be immense. In Jamshedpur, we have fantastic ideas. Fantastic.
Good evening, everybody. On behalf of Prabandha Talks, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Ishaat Hussain for taking time off from his busy schedule and coming down to our campus to deliver such an insightful talk. We also thank our respected Father Dilima, Director Mr. Ranjan Ghosh, and all our faculty members. It was lovely listening to you, sir. Various things like, whatever gets measured gets counted. And a very good thing which I really liked in the presentation was that the profit after tax of Tata Group of companies is much more than a lot of revenues of IT companies, in fact. As a token of appreciation, I would ask Mirella to present a memento to Mr. Hussain.